depended on keeping the proprietary strategy secret. And that kept us as investors from talking about it. And interestingly enough, in the late 1990s and into 2000, especially in the late 1990s, 99, the Madoff fund would have been the largest, probably the largest hedge fund in the world, and yet no one knew that it existed. That was just strange. Wouldn't you think that if you were managing money and you were doing well, you would want the world to know about it? If it sounds too good to be true, we all know that phrase, and yet we let it get away from us. We let other kinds of stimuli and facts override what we know to be a problem. Our stomachs will say, this sounds too good to be true. And a rational observation, or maybe not so rational, actually emotional observation, well, wears nice suits, he's a nice guy, he's got a great reputation. We ignored all the evidence that said there were problems in favor of chasing yields. The now famous Harry Markopoulos, the whistleblower, identified in an email to the SEC 32 flags, red flags. They included things such as a complete lack of volatility in monthly earnings. And this was supposed to be invested in the stock market. We're not talking about just treasury bills. An astonishing ability to time the market and move to cash. He was always in treasury bills at year end. How convenient for audit purposes. There were no performance audits ever permitted. He had 16% annual returns, 4% of which were given to the feeder hedge funds. The rest were kept by investors. He didn't take a fee. How does he do that? How does he make money on a fund and not take a fee? He alleged he was doing it with trading, just with the trading commissions. He refused due diligence. There were some Wall Street firms, in fact, none of the major Wall Street firms had done anything with him. When they went to try to do due diligence with him, he said no. They said, sorry, we're not interested. There were other sophisticated investors who went to do due diligence with him. He said no. They said, okay, we'll still give you some money. That was a red flag. There were no footprints. He left no trading evidence. The largest hedge fund in the world would have left trading evidence. There was none. You couldn't see it happening. Now, not all of those things are the kinds of things that the average wealthy investor would be able to identify. Maybe the average wealthy investor shouldn't be investing in certain kinds of funds or hedge funds in general. Many of the hedge funds of funds really turned out to be just due diligence frauds. They claimed they were doing due diligence on their investments, and they really had done nothing on him. So the net is that missing or ignoring the cues with Madoff got lots and lots of investors into trouble. When you miss the cues, that's part of what can lead to being a victim of fraud. The most fundamental driver, I would say, based on, I've been doing a lot of reading on this, and the most fundamental driver is the risk-reward dynamic that is in play. We have a tendency to focus on the reward that's held out in front of us, the carrot of the 12% returns or 2% returns per day or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it's like a drug. We're oblivious to all the risk cues that are being left, that really are right in front of us, and yet we ignore it. And you have to remember, you cannot separate return from risk. You can't get 16% returns per year with no volatility without something strange going on underneath. There are a number of behavioral patterns that all of us, ordinary people, exhibit that a hustler will exploit. Distraction, social compliance. The distraction principle, when you're distracted by what retains your interest, a hustler can pretty much do anything to you. This is basically a fundamental principle of magic shows. I don't know, I go into a magic show and I don't know how they do that stuff. What's this guy, can't think of the guy's name that wanders around Vegas doing things, and I'm just amazed. I don't get it. I know there's something going on, but I don't get it. And excuse me, it's easy to be distracted. The social compliance principle. These are scams that involve personating someone in authority, and hustlers find it easy to scam us if we're comfortable moving into a mode of acknowledging authority. The herd principle. Even a suspicious potential victim will let their guard down when everyone next to them appears to share the same risks. There's sort of a safety in numbers kind of a phenomenon. The deception principle: things and people are not what they seem, and hustlers know how to manipulate you and make you believe what they are. Need and greed: this is where your needs and desires, your own needs and desires, make you vulnerable. Once hustlers know what you really want, they can easily manipulate you. And the principle applies to the most visceral of factors. Maybe it's drug addiction, our need for food or sleep or water, moods and emotions, physical pain. It refers kind of the whole spectrum of human needs, whether it's something that you really want or something that's more fundamental to life. And then the time principle: when you're under time pressure to make an important choice, you're likely to take some shortcuts and use that intuitive processing system instead of the rational processing system. A hustler will steer you toward a decision process that causes you to compromise your decision making. We all need to be concerned about a population that is increasingly at risk of fraud, and that is our aging population. Tell you a story here. Wilson Smith was a 78-year-old retiree who left his home in California to go to a high school reunion and stopped in Las Vegas along the way. He met a 20-something-year-old woman there, and when he returned home from his high school reunion, he stayed in contact with this young woman. Over the next 3-year period of time, she gutted his bank accounts, used his financial information to obtain 28 credit cards, and spent $750,000. When the fraud was finally exposed, so was the depth of his Alzheimer's. He wired her money, bought her a car, gave her his bank information, let bags full of unopened bills collect in the basement. He was a former banker. There was a short documentary of his story shown on Capitol Hill last October. You can find this on the internet. It was created by an advocacy group seeking passage of the Elder Justice Act, which did pass in March. More of us will be at risk in coming years. The baby boomers are hitting retirement. Americans are living longer, and we're living longer than we planned for in retirement. Some of us will face difficulties making retirement assets last an extra decade or more. The desire and need for greater income will make us prime targets. Elders are targeted because they are homeowners, they're at home alone, they have accumulated wealth. One study estimates that seniors lose $2.6 billion to fraud every year. And fraud hurts elders more because they don't have the time to recover. Victim vulnerabilities. There was a study done by what was at the time the National Association of Securities Dealers, that is now called FINRA. And they did a profile of investors who had become victims in financial frauds. And the profile was that more of those individuals were male, married, college educated, and financially comfortable. They had personalities that were very self-reliant and self-deterministic, and they felt competent to make investment decisions. They often rely on their own judgments, and they are significantly more likely than non-victims to have previously invested in high-risk products such as penny stocks and foreign currency. They were more financially literate. In another survey done by the AARP recently, victims were likely to believe fraudulent sales pitches, thinking that their chances of winning were good and the prizes offered for a fee were a good bargain. Over 2/3 of the respondents reported that they had difficulty telling fraudulent and legitimate pitches apart. Two-thirds. And in research that's more recent, we're starting to better understand that apart from other cognitive processing, where everything can seem fine, as we age, we may lose the capacity to appreciate risk. Many fraud schemes contain misrepresentations or promises that are so implausible that most reasonable investors would dismiss